what I wanted to do was start with having our four younger generation devotees in the room here say, starting with you, I want you to say something, anything, about either Lord Rishabhadeva or Bharata Maharaj. Just any one thing. Not their whole story, but one thing. When you think of Bharata Maharaj or you think of Lord Rishabhadeva, what's one thing? One thing. Nothing?
Being shy.
She being shy, okay. Open, fill in the blank. This Earth planet is named after one of the two of them. Which of the two is this Earth planet named after? Varsha. Right? Okay, very good. One thing about either of these two.
About Maharaj, has many lifetimes, for example, turning big deer.
You gotta speak slower. You're too fast for me.
He kept on turning into different things throughout his lifetimes. For example,
3 lifetimes.
he was a good devotee, but then he found a deer, and then he became attached to that deer, and then he turned into a deer in his next lifetime.
Oh dear, he became attached to a deer. Okay.
After he passed away, thinking about the deer, because he was so spiritually advanced, Krishna says in the Gita that any spiritual advancement is kept throughout the lifetime. So in his next life, he was born in a Vaishnava family.
Okay. After the deer family. And last but not least. Hello. One thing.
Bharata Maharaja is the son of Lord Rsabhadeva.
Maharaj was the son of Rsabhadeva. Very good. I'll tell you why I was inspired to speak about this topic. Inspiration came as a result of giving a seminar in Portland, Oregon, on the latter part of Madhurya Kandambini. Madhurya Kandambini is a skinny book, but very thorough book on the stages of bhakti. In the earlier section of the stages of bhakti, there's the Anartha Nivritti section. In the Anartha Nivritti section, there are anarthas, or unwanted things that arise from different causes. This, that, and the other thing, and the other thing. And the most difficult to remove anarthas are anarthas that are caused by offense. And in that section in Madhurya Kandambini, there's an explanation of Bharata Maharaj and why Bharata Maharaj fell from the position of Bhava Bhakti to the position of stopping his devotional practice, consciously stopping his devotional practice altogether. And the explanation given is from a prior Acharya, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, wrote after Jiva Goswami. And Jiva Goswami writes in Bhakti Sandarbha, you can look it up later if you like, Anuchhed 157, that in his previous life, Bharata Maharaj had engaged in an offense. Doesn't say what the offense was. The verse in the story of Bharata Maharaj says, due to his past fruitive activities, he desisted his bhakti practice. And then Jiva Goswami comments, it's not possible through fruitive activities, even adverse fruitive activities, that is powerful enough to cause one to fall from bhakti, or to speak of fall from bhava bhakti. Therefore, reference to fruitive activities in this case means offense, because that's sufficiently powerful to block the power of bhakti. So he desisted, Jiva Goswami explains, because of a previous lifetime's offense. So that's pretty significant. Offense carries over to the next lifetime, to the next lifetime, to the next lifetime, to the next lifetime. Don't mess with offense. Doesn't say what the offense was. On the other hand, he became the son of Rsabhadeva. And as the son of Rsabhadeva, he became the king following Rsabhadeva. And before he went to the forest to engage in his austerities, it describes in that same chapter that he ruled over many yuga cycles, not just one yuga cycle. That's 4 times yuga cycle. Many yuga cycles, he was the king. So he was a special person, Chiranjiva, long-living entity. And then at a ripe stage of his life, that's when he went to the forest, and still the reaction of a past offense was causing him to stop his bhakti. So watch out for Vaishnava Aparad. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So that was my inspiration for discussing. The name Rsabhadeva comes from literally the best, because he was supremely virtuous. He was Rishabha. And as an incarnation of the Supreme Lord, he was very responsible in his governance, because he was acting as a king. And here's a very beautiful BBT painting showing sitting on a big seat before his 100 sons and so many others attending. No PA system. He had a good voice. And instructing them. So his instructions are very significant. The instructions of Rsabhadeva, quoted again and again and again by Srila Prabhupada in his books and his lectures. A description from Lago Bhagavatamrita is the category of avatar is he's a Prabhava avatar. Prabhava. Avatar is of 2 kinds. Those that manifest themselves very briefly and are not so famous compared to other ones. Mohini, Hangsa, and the Yoga avatars beginning with Shukla. Now some of the Yoga avatars are very well known, but there's Prabhava avatar is one of the categories. And the second kind, generally they're authors of scriptures, generally they're great sages. Dhanvantari, you know what Dhanvantari is famous for? Ayurveda? Oh yeah, Ayurveda. Dhanvantari. Rshabhadeva, Vyasa, of course, Dattatreya, and Lord Kapila, the Sankhya teachings. So he didn't write books, but he gave teachings. And Rsabhadeva, before we go into Bharat, Rsabhadeva, after instructing his 100 sons, he instructed thoroughly about renounced order, and then he demonstrated it with his life. And he went to an extreme of renunciation, where he lived like an avaduta. He was the king, ruled for a long time, but then was behaving like an avaduta, like a bad man. And then people who didn't know who he was, children and elders and people would taunt him and say bad things and do bad things, and he wouldn't respond at all. He left his world in that state of avaduta consciousness, totally absorbed. And his son took responsibility for the kingdom. This is directly a verse from the Bhagavatam. Destiny fixed the time for Maharaj Bharat's enjoyment of material opulence at 1,000 times 10,000 years. So add 3 zeros to another 10,000. So that's a long time. Spans multiple yoga cycles. When that period was finished, he retired from family life and divided the wealth he had received from his forefathers among his sons. Mentioning that because it's pretty astonishing on top of what happened after that. So very, 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 very qualified. When he renounced his kingdom, he went to Pulaha Ashram, which is very up in the North Country in Hardwar, by the bank of the Gandaki River. And there he engaged in worship. There's a detail also discussed by Jiva Goswami. And he was a pure devotee. He was a pure devotee in the stage of Bhava Bhakti, worshiping. But here, this painting shows he was worshiping Surya Narayan, because in Jiva Goswami's commentary he writes, normally, and this is again in Bhakti Sandarbha, normally when people worship the demigods, they worship the demigods with the idea of getting some favor. Bhakti Siddhanta called them gift-giving demigods, gift-giving devas. And Bharata Maharaj followed the same practice and the rules and regulations, but his consciousness was that each of the devas, they're extensions of the Lord's own transcendental body, and they're performing a service unto the Supreme Lord. So he didn't just worship them as devatas who are servants of the Supreme Lord. He worshipped them, according to Jiva Goswami, as the Supreme Lord, or the representatives of the Supreme Lord. And so that was his consciousness. And he was completely absorbed in worship of Surya Narayan by chanting the Gayatri mantra. Now there's some details described. Gayatri is thought of in different ways by different persons. Some say or some think Gayatri is worshipping the sun god, Surya. Some say it's the worship of Gayatri is worship of the impersonal Brahman. Some say worship of the chanting of the Gayatri mantra is worship of Narayana. So because Narayana is situated within the sun, the form of Narayana, Surya Narayan, is a golden hue. This is the description in the Bhagavatam. So while he was engaged in this way, on this bank of the Gandaki River for a long time, one fine day he saw a deer on the opposite side. We all know the story. Opposite side of the river. And as the deer was drinking water, the deer heard a loud roar of a lion. And when the deer heard the loud roar of the lion, she jumped out of fear. We discussed this yesterday at the program, the autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight. You don't think, it's just nervous system response. She heard the roar of a lion, she jumped. And when she jumped, because of fear, the pregnancy of the pregnant deer resulted in a miscarriage, and the infant baby deer, the fawn, fell into the river. And the river was moving rather swiftly, and so the female deer got carried away by the river and drowned in the river, leaving the poor baby deer, or the fawn, helpless. So Bharat Maharaj, being a king, he knew all about Kshatriya's duty of giving protection, so he gathered up the little baby fawn and brought the baby fawn to his ashram. And in course of time, because the fawn was dependent without a mother, he acted like the mother. He took care of the needs of the dependent fawn. So there he is in the forest after all these years, yugas of acting as king, now dedicating himself exclusively without those worldly duties to the personality of Godhead. And he gradually attended to all the needs of the deer as the deer was growing up. And although he continued externally with the duties of worship, which was part of what he was doing, living in the forest, he became very distracted. It's described in times he would be in the middle of worship. You don't stop worship in the middle, but he stopped worship in the middle and looking around for where the fawn was. And wishing well for the deer, and his whole attention became distracted. Mega distracted. So here's the verse, or the way that Bhanu Swami has translated the verse from the 5th canto Bhagavatam. This is not just purport, this is Shukadev Goswami. Bharat Maharaj was overwhelmed by uncontrollable desire, which was manifest in the form of the deer. Due to the fruitive results, that's all it says, fruitive results of his past deeds, he fell down from mystic yoga, austerity, and worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If it were not due to his past fruitive activity, how could he have been attracted to the deer after giving up the association of his own son and family, considering them stumbling blocks on the path of spiritual life? How could he show uncontrollable affection for the deer? This was definitely due to his past karma. That's Bhanu Swami's translation of this verse that's in Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas. So here's the explanation given in his Sandarbha. Ordinary fruitive activities are not strong enough to create such an impediment, such as fall down in the path of devotional service. Therefore, fruitive activities mentioned here must have been, so it's intuitive, it's inferred, offenses performed in a previous life. So what the principle, but not what the detail. In this way, King Bharat is like King Indradumna and other devotees that committed offenses. So I'm going to see if our younger generation devotees remember, what did King Indradumna do that was an offense that resulted in a problem for King Indradumna? Any one of you four know? King Indradumna. Speak slower.
I remember that he turned into Gajendra, but I don't know.
Gajendra Moksha. Gajendra. What happened was, he, King Indradumna, after he had ruled for a long time, was living in seclusion, in a forest, in a mountain somewhere. And one sage, and he was engaged in meditation, previous age yoga, Satya Yuga meditation. When the sage came, Agastya Muni, Angira Muni, Agastya Muni came and because King Indradyumna was absorbed in meditation, he didn't even acknowledge Agastya Muni's presence. What to speak of all the other formalities when a guest comes? What to speak of a guest like Agastya Muni? So Agastya Muni became irritated. Sages don't become irritated, but Agastya Muni became irritated for a purpose, for an instruction purpose, and he cursed. What kind of king are you? You can't even acknowledge the presence of a sage when he comes to your cottage. You're like a dull animal. You shall become an elephant. Poof, he became an elephant. So he became an elephant. And he became not only an elephant, but a king of elephants. And then the other things happened. You know the Gajendra Moksha Leela? Yes? I'm asking. Do you remember? That was a yes or no, or you don't know?
There's also a question online.
Well, let's do that at the end. I'm asking, do you know the Gajendra Moksha Leela? He became an elephant, and then what happened? You remember? Okay. Our shy one, do you remember? No. Your brother will tell you later. He knows, and he's not as shy as you are. But privately, he'll tell you later. So this is back to Jiva Goswami Sandarbhas. He's likening what happened with Bharat to what happened with King Indradyumna. That is, some offense, and that some offense caused disruption in their devotional practice. Now, the consequence of the two was different, but that was the cause. His willful, so the commentary further goes, his willful neglect of bhakti due to a past offense resulted in his over-attachment to the deer, thus fall down. The problem wasn't rescuing the deer. That was the right thing to do. To become so attached to the deer that he desisted willfully his devotional practices. That's the problem. And the over-attachment was due to a past offense. Over-attachment meaning so strong was the attachment that he willfully neglected his bhakti practice. And there was consequences. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, same section of the 5th canto Bhagavatam. Bharat's fall down was arranged by the Lord for the purpose of increasing his longing for bhakti after taking birth as a deer and a brahmana. So you got all three of them. So it's not like if this one's right, then that one's wrong, or if that one's wrong or right, then the other one's wrong. Specifically, it's offense. It's very clear. In other words, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is in generations after Jiva Goswami. He certainly knows what Jiva Goswami wrote. Yet, he expressed himself in a different way. So maybe there's different ways to understand that. I'm covering it because it gets confusing sometimes. I've gotten used to devotees asking these stump the Swami questions. If it's this, how come it's that? If it's that, how come it's this? So it could be both causes, or it could be different yuga cycles or different days of Brahma when these pastimes occur. There's different explanations. So, as we know, he one fine day couldn't find the deer. He was doing his worship and the deer was missing. And so he stopped his worship and went looking for the deer. And as he was looking for the deer, it was in the evening time and he couldn't see his way. And by mistake, he fell off a cliff. And as he was falling off the cliff, he was thinking of the deer at the time of death. And so thinking of the deer at the time of death, combined with the protection, was slackened by his stopping his devotional practice. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, he received the body of a deer in his next life. And so in his body of a deer, he was given the benediction of remembering his life as Bharata Maharaj. That was your point. The benefit doesn't say that he remembered his offense from the life prior to Bharata Maharaj. It does say that as the deer, he remembered his life as Bharata Maharaj, and in essence, the devotion to the personality of Godhead. So that didn't leave him. That's unusual. Animals don't have that capacity. Most of us don't have our capacity. Remember what our previous life was. In this life, whatever that may be. Some persons have that capacity. Most of us don't. And he had an attraction for the same topics that he engaged him as the king. So what he did was he was in a forest, and he found places where there were sages in the forest, and he hung out with the sages as they were having their activities and conversations and mantra chanting. He would stand nearby and listen to the sound vibration. And when they had their meals, this very pleasant, gentle deer, they gave remnants of their meal to the deer. So he had prasadam and he had harikatha for his life as a deer. And when he left his body as a deer, instead of going through the rest of the evolutionary cycle, he immediately took his birth in a family of brahmanas. But in that family of brahmanas, he appeared to be completely detached from any worldly sense of anything. And when people saw him naked, wandering here and there, they thought he was a madman. And so some of them, not everyone, but as the painting is showing, some abused him verbally, some abused him physically, dogs growling at him, treating him like a madman. And he made no response. And on one occasion, in this state of madness, some dacoits found him, and they thought, he's a madman, let us make an offering to the goddess Kali. A human sacrifice. Well, it didn't turn out so well for those fellows that wanted to do the human sacrifice, because the goddess Kali burst from the deity, and with her so many arms and choppers, chopped off their heads, protecting Jad Bharat. Then as time passed, Jad Bharat, looking like a dullard, but having a physically strong body and appearance, was enlisted as a palanquin carrier for the king. So palanquin have their 4 spots, and one of the spots was missing. The 3 palanquin carriers found this dullard who could just, be suited for carrying the king's palanquin. However, he was a very gentle person, and he was very, very careful to not step on ants. So as he was more careful in stepping on ants than how he was carrying the palanquin for the king, when he would dance around the ants, the king palanquin got jostled. So he leaned over the side of the palanquin and blasted him. And he spoke harshly. But he carried on, and after carrying on, it happened again. And so this is a nice painting. The palanquin carrier carried king Rahugana said it again. What's wrong with you? And so forth and so on. And for his whole life, up to this point in time, it's a detail, but it's a nice part of the story of his life, he purposely spoke nothing to anybody. Not that he couldn't. He didn't. He by choice. He didn't want to engage in any kind of worldly exchange with worldly people. But in the commentary, there is indication that Jad Bharat saw something within King Rahugana that sparked him to speak for the first time. And when he spoke, he explained why, not only why he wasn't carrying the palanquin evenly, but he gave teachings to the king about transcendental knowledge. So here's a reference from the same chapter. The material body is made of earth and stone in the form of feet, ankles, calves, knees, thighs, torso, throat, and head. Upon the shoulders, his shoulders, is the wooden palanquin. And within the palanquin is the so-called king of Sauvira. The body of the king is simply another transformation of earth. But within that body, your lordship is situated and falsely thinking that you are the king of the state of Sauvira, a captive of such falsehood. Now, hearing that and many, many, many other transcendental teachings from a person that was considered a dullard and fit only for manual labor, the king understood this isn't an ordinary person. He then descended from the palanquin, kneeled before Jad Bharat. The other palanquin carriers were pretty amazed by the whole scene, by the words of Jad Bharat, what to speak of the behavior of the king. And that inspired Jad Bharat to speak further. There's a long there's three long sections. And after hearing Rsabhadeva, Rahugana, yes. He submitted himself. So this painting is meant to show the string of ants, and he was avoiding stepping on the string of ants. And I haven't included purposefully because it's a really long, although it's a nice section, lots and lots of instruction. And then after hearing and recognizing this isn't an ordinary person, the king asked further questions and further conversation. So he describes the forest of material existence and, in very poetic language, the sounds in the forest, the creatures in the forest, the hunger of one who's living in the forest, and the forest of material existence, and running after the mirage of water in the desert, like in a desert, and suffering and suffering and suffering. That's the image that's being shown. So the king understood. He's speaking in metaphorical and poetic language, but the king understood. Eventually, the king recognized his position, that he's a spiritual entity, not a king. And as a spiritual entity, he's meant for service to the Supreme. So gradually, further instruction. There's a third set of instructions, very similar to the Bhagavad Gita instructions. And Sankhya philosophy, taught by Jad Bharat to the king. So the king became purified and submitted to Jad Bharat as his instructing guru. And reformed himself from his prideful bodily conception identity as a king. He didn't stop being a king, but he gave up the material conception of his identity. And after that exchange, Jad Bharat was no longer the palanquin carrier. He's a hero. But Jad Bharat, that isn't the end of the story of Jad Bharat. Here's a further description. There were some waves of dissatisfaction in the mind of Jad Bharat due to being insulted by King Rahugana. So although he was in this transcendental position, the verse specifically says, some waves of dissatisfaction lingered in his mind. Jad Bharat, although that impetus was there, he neglected the impetus. And his heart again became calm and quiet like an ocean. Although King Rahugana had insulted him, he was a great Paramahansa. Being a Vaishnava, this is commentary. He was naturally very kind-hearted, and he therefore told the king about the constitutional position of the soul. He then forgot the insult because King Rahugana pitifully begged pardon at his lotus feet. After this, he began to wander all over the earth just as before. Now, a few lessons, I think, that are important lessons. I remember having a discussion with Bhakti Rupa Prabhu. I was thinking of this the other day, of one of the great authorities in the Sri Vaishnava line was Jamunacharya. And Jamunacharya, before he became Jamunacharya, he was a king. And because he was a king, he had great opulence. Not only he had great opulence, he had access to wives. And so he was indulging in material activities with his wives, not transcendental activities with his wives. Later, by the Lord's arrangement, he got a different kind of association. He left that position as the king. So there's some very well-known verses that Jamunacharya wrote, one of which Prabhupada referred to again and again, that whenever I think of sex life, automatically my lip curls and I spit at the thought. So I had this discussion with Bhakti Rupa. I remember it very well. I was taking the position that because he was in this elevated post, he didn't have such thoughts. And to contemplate of having such thoughts made him disgusted. And Bhakti Rupa was adamant, no, he had such thoughts. He had reminiscence of his past activities. But when he thought of those past activities in his body of Jamunacharya, spontaneously, not out of avoidance, but out of spontaneous attraction for the personality of Godhead, it was disdainful to him. So reading this, I'm taking Bhakti Rupa's side. That is, of course, there are different ways to look at this thing. But he's speaking here, this is a Bhagavatam verse. Jad Bharat was insulted. Now, how does a transcendentalist on the elevated platform of Jad Bharat deal with the duality of material life? Matra sparshas konteya satoshna sukha dukkha da. You know the verse? Agama payo nityas tang sadiksha swabharata. So in this material world, there's duality. And one of the, happiness and distress, honor, dishonor, winter, summer season, sometimes and sometimes, duality. So a transcendentalist in chapter 2, he's instructed to tolerate. So here is also, he tolerated, but he went beyond tolerating, he transcended. And how did he, so the reminiscence was there of a feature of duality that was insult. Now, for a transcendentalist, what's their insult? Because they're not the body anyways. And they're not the mind anyways. So what's there to insult? But he felt something. And he overcame that something by being very kind-hearted, describing the constitutional position of the soul. It's similar to, not identical with, but similar to the nice description when Arjuna comes back to Hastinapur to report to his elder brother, Yudhishthira, that Krishna has departed. And when he goes back, he can barely speak. That Krishna has departed. And as he's going on describing his activities with Krishna, and specifically the teachings that Krishna gave on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the Bhagavad Gita's message, his disturbed mind became more balanced just by hearing and remembering. So that's a good lesson. I think it's an important lesson for all of us, because here we are in the world of duality, and sometimes. So the tolerance is not just bite the bullet or grin and bear it, but it's go to a higher position. And that's, rather than reacting, it's reflecting on the higher consciousness position and go to the higher consciousness position. And then one is protected or not affected. So he then forgot the insult because Rahugana pitifully begged pardon at his lotus feet. After this, he began to wander all over the earth just as before. So before he was conscripted in the service of the king, he was just wandering here and there like a bad man. And then after he was freed from that service of carrying the palanquin of the king, he went back to wandering here and there throughout the whole countryside, and eventually gave up his body in that condition, completely immersed and absorbed in Krishna's thought. Similar to, but different from, this particular narration, just as almost done here, there's a description in Canto 11, the Avanti Brahmana story. I know somebody that just gave a whole seminar on the Avanti Brahmana. It's a nice narration. In this section, their description is there. Krishna said, "There's virtually no saintly man in this world capable of resettling his own mind after it has been disturbed by the insulting words of uncivilized men." Now this Avanti Brahmana story is part of the Uddhava Gita section. Uddhava Gita section means Krishna is instructing Uddhava before his departure in Dwarka. So he tells the story, the Avanti Brahmana story. Sharp arrows which pierce one's chest and reach the heart do not cause as much suffering as the arrows of harsh, insulting words that become lodged within the heart when spoken by uncivilized men. So Krishna is acknowledging the more painful than arrows is the painfulness of harsh words spoken by uncivilized men. Now, a transcendentalist, water off a duck's back, doesn't bother them at all. But Krishna is acknowledging most persons it has some effect. But a Brahmana is then able to tolerate such things. So he tells this whole story to illustrate this particular message of the Avanti Brahmana. An historical account teaches how to tolerate insults of others. It's a good story. It's a good lesson for moving towards this direction of transcendentalism. Now, the circumstance is Krishna wants, is not only wants, Krishna is going to leave, and Uddhava knows. He just intuitively knows. Krishna didn't announce to him. He just knew Krishna's internal thoughts and feelings enough to know he's going to leave. So he requested Krishna, take me with you. Please don't leave me here. Krishna said, I have some service for you. After you complete that service, then you can come and join me. And the service was, I'm going to give some teachings, and I want you to take these teachings to Rishikesh, to Badrikashram, where there's the sages Narayana Rishi and their associates, and you carry my instructions to them. You're the message carrier. I didn't get a chance to visit them in the course of my worldly appearance in this incarnation. You please go on my behalf. And when that mission is accomplished, then you can come and join me. So he gave all these instructions with that explicit purpose. Now, certainly, Narayana Rishi are engaged in austerities and similar activities for manifesting and sustaining transcendence, tolerating difficulties, austerities, etc., for a higher purpose, higher consciousness purpose. So this is not that they didn't know how to do that, but it's an instruction to support what they were already doing. And I'm going to end shortly. Both of these narrations, the conclusions of Bharata Maharaja and how he became Jad Bharat and became settled in a spiritual conception, of course, in an extreme manner, but he had transcendental knowledge all the while. He was behaving purposefully because he just didn't want to get entangled in fruitive activities. Extreme. So it's not that we're supposed to be extreme like that, be avadutas. But so if someone does behave in that way or doesn't behave in that way, both are to be fixed in understanding the transcendental reality. One of those questions, and how do any one of us approach the spiritual conception of our real identity? And the Vedanta Sutra teaches us, it starts with inquisitiveness. And the way that Prabhupada expressed it is the who am I question. So we're not the coverings, the mind and body. And if we're not the coverings in mind and body, then who are we? So there's a conception, and then continue following the conception, and you may get some realization. We're a tiny spirit soul, eternity, bliss, and knowledge. And that's who we are. We're covered by a gross bodily and a subtle body, but our real identity is the soul. And how to get there, the path of perfection, that's Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and our very simple process, chanting Hare Krishna. So here's from 11th canto, again, this is the Uddhava Gita section. The rare human form of life, which is, although temporary, affords the opportunity to attain the highest perfection. So, Bharata Maharaja and Rahugana, and Rsabhadeva. This microphone stand, before we use it again, needs a screwdriver. Right there. Because I have to hold it. Right. Any comments or questions? Yes. Govinda, we have a microphone.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Can you further explain a little bit how Jad Bharat was insulted by Rahugana?
How
Even-
Jadbar did what?
He was insulted and he didn't appreciate his attitude. Although he was in the Paramahamsa platform, he did not identify with the body or
Yeah.
any insults related to the body, yet he was insulted somehow. But then he became tranquil.
Well, there's two ways to look at it. And one way to look at it is he didn't. The other way to look at it is he felt something, but he went beyond that feeling. The feeling of being insulted. So the Bhagavatam, that's directly the verse. Gosh, I mean, what's the platform that Jad Bharat is on? He's not behaving like a madman as an act. He was literally detached, literally, absolutely detached. So if one who's literally and absolutely detached, how they can be agitated by someone speaking something insulting? Because there were so many other examples where he was insulted. His life was put at risk, and he remained undisturbed. So some harsh words by a king, so what? That's, what I think you're asking. How could he feel that? Harsh words of a fool. So he's impervious. He's not on that platform. At least we have to take the words of the Bhagavatam as they are, and that he felt something, and then that feeling is the same references. Yamunacharya, the topmost platform, they don't feel anything. But for the sake, one might say, for the sake of instruction, the Bhagavatam is teaching how even such a person, for instructive purposes, they may feel something and then go beyond that feeling. It's like, it's a little bit like if it's raining out, you can just ignore that there's rain. But you know that it's raining out. Or it's really hot. You tolerate that it's really hot, but you know that it's really hot. So although, Paramahamsa is not on the platform of the bodily conception or the mental conception, so harsh words mean nothing. On the other hand, the verse is saying it, so we have to take it as it is. He acknowledged there was something, there was harsh words spoken.
Was it maybe that we are personal beings, right? And we have feelings.
Yes.
And he acknowledged the insult, but
Yes.
But then he understood that this has nothing to do with me.
Yes. Nice point.
Guru Maharaj, both in the case of King Rsabhadeva and then also Jada Bharata, they both became avadutas. So my question is, it seems like a very, very difficult position to be in. They are making themselves so vulnerable. Uncivilized people are attacking them. Anyways, what inspires or motivates great souls to take that path? Are they trying to teach something?
In Rsabhadeva, he's an incarnation. In Bharata Maharaj, he's the son. In Bharata Maharaj's case, at least the explanation is he went to the completely opposite extreme. I'm not going to be influenced by anything material. So it's not, to be imitated, but that's the impetus was, I'm not going to become attached to or become influenced by anything material to an extreme. And and that was his position. Because he took that position, it invoked or provoked persons to say and do abusive things. Rsabhadeva is an incarnation. He's not a living entity striving for something. He's an incarnation, but in exhibiting a certain category of transcendentalist or immersion in divinity, although he's divinity as an incarnation. So he's exhibiting that extreme. Having been a father of 100 sons, and having been a king of the whole world, and done all the things that kings have to do of the whole world. So it's my my thought is going to Grandfather Bhishma and his departure. He did so many, many, many things for so many, many, many people, so many worldly things. And he wasn't attached to any of it. And when the time came for his departure, he just withdrew his consciousness from the worldly and fixed on transcendental. But that's his manifestation of his complete Krishna consciousness, Mahajan capacity consciousness, is different than these other examples. But it's similar. So doing something although not attached, and then being way on the other extreme, as of demonstrating it's certainly possible to exist where you're not only not attached, you just don't exhibit as if you were attached. It's variety. That's my answer. And when Lord Chaitanya was visited by Raghunath Das Goswami, and Raghunath Das, my father's not letting me join you. Please make an arrangement so I can be with you. I just want to be with you. And then Lord Chaitanya gave him an instruction. Live internally, be with me. Externally, live your life as if you're an ordinary person. So he exhibited his capacity to live his life as if an ordinary person, etc., etc., etc. But internally, he was instructed to cultivate the internal absorption. So now, how the external might look is going to be different, according to inspiration, the calling of Krishna, the indication from Krishna to do this and do it like that. So diversity is my answer.
So in the case of the Avadutas, is it a conscious attempt to teach people
Maybe.
detachment?
Maybe.
Because it seems like they're also...
In the case of Jadbharat, it's not to teach detachment. It was protection. I'm not going to make that mistake again.
Okay. Self-protection.
Yeah. I mean, that's how the commentary reads.
Because it seems like it creates so much opportunities for people to become offenders to such great souls.
Great souls can be offended whether you're an Avaduta or not. Be successful, you'll have offenders. Prabhupada spoke like that so many times. Don't do anything, no one will bother. Do something, people will bother. We have so many, and we start listing the enemies that he had. And he wasn't unaware. So what did he do? He didn't become an Avaduta. When he went ahead, and he inspired enemies. Bhakti said, attempted murder, many things, because he was successful, not an Avaduta.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Jada Bharata, and then also Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. There means Jada Bharat.
There's some similarities, isn't there?
Yeah, lot of similarity, but at the same times, Jada Bharat, he was internalizing and not saying anything, and other side Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, he was more vocal to not to be here in this material world. That's what I am thinking. But there is a lot of similarity.
Well, certainly renounced.
Yeah.
Renunciation personified. But he didn't remain silent, that's true. He didn't have a lot to say either.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
Something further.
related to the Jad Bharat, answer is, I am thinking it is there in the Sadhu Sangastakam, Titichnavaha Karunika. So he was tolerant, and then out of the compassion, as you mentioned, he was filled. So Mayi Ananya Bhavena Bhaktim Kurvanti Ye Didham. So devotee, they are fully absorbed and they are not affected by the effect of any different kind of miseries, because their mind is fully absorbed, full. So due to that, he was not rebellious, I'm thinking, and because of the karunika nature, and he was vented out. That could be the one reason.
Well, you're making a statement that's similar to Govinda's question. Yes?
Kind of, yes.
Kind of. So, I'm not going to say Sukadeva Goswami got it wrong. I'm not going to be foolish and say something like that. So if he didn't get it wrong, then how did he get it right? Which leads to the question. So then there are different ways of looking at how the answer might be. So you're suggesting a possible answer, but he was feeling a feeling. You with strong emphasis, absolutely no affinity, untouched, and yet he was feeling this feeling. So there can be different explanations. You have something further?
That was regarding, you said, variety.
Yeah.
And you see different devotees, they have different moods.
Yes, they sure do.
Like in the example of Pundarik Vidyanidhi, he exhibited a complete different mood than Gaur Kishore does. Yet, Babaji Maharaj, yet
Yeah.
internally their meditation is the same.
Yes.
Based on pure
Yes.
devotional
Yes.
principles.
Yeah. How about our host? Do you have anything you want to contribute to this discussion? No. Okay. Put you on the spot. You're still smiling though. When I came in the door, this big smile. Okay. As long as you're happy. You have something.
So if Bharat Maharaj, because of his offenses to devotees, you said, right, had that attachment to the deer.
Well, it doesn't say offenses. It's singular. It doesn't say.
Offense.
It doesn't say what.
Okay.
It doesn't say how many. It just
It
what
just said
says.
offense.
Yeah, some
Okay.
offense. Fruit of activity in the category of an offense.
So if this is the fate of such an exalted person, what is our fate if intentionally or
You got the
unintentionally?
message. You got the message. I said it multiple times at the beginning. Very dangerous stuff. Offense. Lethal. Certainly toxic. Very dangerous stuff. It's real stuff. So you're good point. I mean, yeah, I think the same. How can we live our life without unintentionally doing something that's at least is perceived by somebody as offense,
Exactly.
even if that's not our intention? Who knows what that something was that before was.
But then we are encouraged that the holy name, helps us cross over.
Yes.
And if you remember Krishna, by his grace, at the time of our passing, there is hope that we can make it
It's
back
a real
to Godhead.
serious thing. That's the bottom line message. It's a really serious thing. Because 2 more times I'm going to be teaching Madhurya Kandambani. So it's an important for me, it's an important meditation. I mean, for us as practicing devotees, but I'm going to be teaching it 2 more times, beginning to end. And it's a big one.
Teaching what, Maharaj, again?
Madhurya Kandambani.
Oh, okay.
Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. 9 stages of bhakti.
When are you teaching this?
Thanksgiving holiday in Houston, and during the national holiday in China. But it would be Zoom because I'm not going to China.
Will it be taped?
Huh?
Will it be taped?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Zoom. Live and recorded.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll end there. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai. Srila Prabhupada Swami Maharaj ki jai.